Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the program. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C., and here on Firstpost America, over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Heavy monsoon rains triggered landslides and flash floods across northern Pakistan, killing at least 117 people in the last 24 hours. Hezbollah's chief accuses Lebanon's government of handing the country to Israel by pushing for the group's disarmament and warns that it would fight to keep its weapons. Negotiations on a global plastic treaty in Geneva to address the mounting crisis of plastic pollution ends without a deal after 11 days of discussions. Singapore fines billionaire and F1 tycoon Ong Beng Zhang $23,000 after he pleads guilty to a charge connected to a gift scandal that shocked the country last year. And South Korea's president vows to respect North Korea's political system and build military trust, a day after Pyongyang said it had no interest in improving relations with Seoul. We begin in Alaska, where President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to meet later today for a high-stakes summit that could shape the future not only of Ukraine, but all of Europe. Now, heading into the meeting, President Trump said he would not be intimidated by Vladimir Putin, adding that if talks went well, a three-way summit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was not invited to today's meeting, would be even more important.
It's a war that should have never happened. If I weren't president, in my opinion, he would much rather take over all of Ukraine. But I am president, and he's not going to mess around with me.
Now, this is Vladimir Putin's first trip to Western soil since ordering the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, which has killed tens of thousands of people. Russian forces have also made rapid gains in the lead up to the summit, and President Trump extended the invitation to the Russian leaders at the Russian leader's suggestion, but has since warned that the meeting could be over within minutes if Putin refuses to compromise.
But I think that it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting.
Now, in the lead up to the summit, Putin praised the Trump administration's energetic efforts to end the war. But his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, struck a more guarded tone, saying Russia's position is clear.
We never anticipate ahead of time. We know that we have arguments and we have clear position. We will explain it. A lot has already been done during the visits of the special envoy of the U.S. President, Steve Witkoff. The President, Vladimir Putin of Russia, told about this. Witkoff spoke on behalf of President Trump. I hope that we will continue this very useful conversation.
Now, away from the official talking points, exiled Russian opposition figure Yulia Navalny urged both leaders to strike a deal to free Russian and Ukrainian political prisoners held for speaking out against the war. The talks are set to begin after 11 a.m. local time at a U.S. Air Force Base, a former Cold War outpost. The Kremlin has reportedly said Putin and Trump are expected to meet alone with interpreters before a working lunch with aides. For now, expectations are high for the first U.S.-Russia presidential summit in more than 4 years. But Moscow and Kyiv remain far apart on how they end the conflict. So what exactly does each side want? Well, for Russia, the summit is an opportunity to press Moscow's hardline demands for ending the conflict. Russia demands Ukrainian withdrawal from the Kherson, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk regions that Moscow claimed to annex in 2022. It also wants Ukraine to halt its military mobilization and abandon its NATO ambitions. In addition, Moscow also wants Western sanctions lifted. Meanwhile, the United States is seeking a rapid ceasefire that would fulfill President Trump's campaign promise. And the U.S. will also look to set the table for a trilateral U.S.-Russia-Ukraine follow-up summit. Now, Kyiv has called for an unconditional ceasefire on land, sea, and sky as a prerequisite to peace talks. But it also reportedly wants the release of all prisoners of war, as well as security guarantees that prevent Russia from attacking again. It's also vowed not to cede any territory to Russia. And for Europe, what does it expect? That the United States will not agree to any territorial deals without Ukraine's presence, and continue economic pressure and sanctions if Russia refuses a fair compromise. So as the world watches, the Alaska summit will test whether personal diplomacy can bridge one of the deepest divides between Washington and Moscow in decades. With fighting still raging and positions deeply entrenched, the outcome could lay the groundwork for peace or set the stage for a prolonged conflict. And now shifting to the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration, Florida is now preparing to open a second immigration detention facility nicknamed the Deportation Depot in the northern part of the state. The announcement comes just 1 month after the state opened a detention center in the Everglades known as Alligator Alcatraz. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis says the new facility will be housed at the Baker Correctional Institution, which is a state prison. Now it's expected to hold 1,300 detention beds with the potential to expand to 2,000, according to state officials.
So I'm here to announce today that we are authorizing and will be soon opening this new illegal immigration detention, processing, and deportation facility here in North Florida. We are calling this the Deportation Depot. It is going to be located here at Baker Correctional Institute. And again, the reason of this is not to just house people indefinitely. We want to process, stage, and then return illegal aliens to their home country. That is the name of the game.
DeSantis says the second center is needed to give the Trump administration more capacity to hold and deport immigrants.
We're here today at this Baker County Correctional Facility because we're taking yet another step in supporting the important mission that President Trump was elected to implement of securing the border, enforcing immigration laws, and removing illegal aliens who are in our society now and sending them back to their home country. We have done more on this than any other state by a country mile.
The governor said the facility will be cheaper to set up since it uses an existing prison, estimating the build-out cost around $6 million and will not house people indefinitely. The Florida Division of Emergency Management, the agency in charge of building the immigration facility, said it could take 2 to 3 weeks before the facility is operational.
The opening of this second facility symbolizes the successful endeavors of our southern facility and our commitment to detaining illegal immigrants across the state. This facility will act as a north-based site that will support the governor's mission to keep Florida a law and order state and to ensure that Florida families remain safe.
Now, Florida had announced plans to temporarily close the prison back in 2021 due to persistent staffing shortages. But DeSantis said on Thursday that the staffing at this site will be handled by the Florida National Guard and state contractors. However, critics, including State Democratic Party Chair Nikki Fried, called the move another wildly expensive and inhumane immigration detention facility paid for by taxpayers. The plan comes as a federal judge last week temporarily halted new construction at Alligator Alcatraz as a lawsuit over its environmental impact continues to play out. That facility was rapidly established in July under DeSantis' directive and has faced constant criticism from attorneys and human rights groups who called the conditions deplorable. On August 10th, protesters gathered outside the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Detention Center in Okeechobee, holding a vigil in support of detainees and denouncing conditions at the facility. They carried signs reading "Abolish ICE" and "Alcatraz is inhumane," alleging poor food quality, strict 5-minute meal times, and limited access to drinking water.
I live my life.
This is what we need to do. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down.
Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down.
So with the second detention facility expected to open within weeks, Florida now finds itself at the center of a deepening national debate over President Trump's immigration policy and just how far states can go in enforcing it. Politics is theater and South America is the stage. Well, Jair Bolsonaro could be cast as the fallen Brazilian leader on house arrest, accused of plotting to steal an election. His legacy is in shambles and his freedom is now on the line. But then enters Donald Trump rushing to his defense. He calls Bolsonaro honest and a victim of political execution. And then he swings at Brazil itself, blasting its trade rules and calling it one of the worst countries on earth to deal with. Now, as Brazil leans closer to China, the stage is now set for multi-way drama with unpredictable consequences. Our next report has all the details.
A trial is making headlines in Brazil and elsewhere. A former president is under siege, and when politics meets persecution, Donald Trump jumps right in. From the Oval Office, he rushed to defend Jair Bolsonaro, calling him an honest man who is facing political execution. Strong words aimed at a former ally now battling for survival.
And Brazil has some very bad laws happening where they took a president and they put him in jail, or they're trying to jail him. And I happen to know the man, and I will tell you, I'm pretty good at people. I think he's an honest man. I think what they've done, this is this is really a political execution that they're trying to do with Bolsonaro. I think that's terrible.
Bolsonaro is on trial before Brazil's top court. He is accused of plotting to overturn the 2022 election, which he lost. But prosecutors allege something even darker. A plan to assassinate the then president-elect and the current president, Lula da Silva, his vice president, and a Supreme Court justice. Bolsonaro denies it all. His lawyers recently asked Brazil's Supreme Court for an acquittal. Yet the noose is tightening. Bolsonaro is under house arrest, forbidden to contact his son Eduardo, who's lobbying in Washington. His son recently said that he's happy that Trump is getting his attention to Brazil, adding that he appreciates what he calls diplomatic medicines being applied to Brazil by the US administration. Bolsonaro's son also warned that more US sanctions and tariffs could soon hit Brazil.
Very happy that President Donald Trump is getting his attention to Brazil. He, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Bessent, and are applying some diplomatic medicines before the Brazilian regime consolidates itself. And this is very important because if they consolidate the regime, no longer will be useful all of these diplomatic medicines as sanctions or take the visas, American visas of this kind of authority.
Tariffs are already at the heart of this storm. On Thursday, Trump blasted Brazil as one of the worst countries on earth to trade with. And yet, the US actually enjoyed a $7 billion trade surplus with Brazil last year. Still, Trump is doubling down. A 50% tariff on Brazilian exports was slapped in late July, threatening billions of dollars in trade. And Brazil is hitting back, not directly at Washington, but by looking east. President Lula spent an hour on the phone with Chinese President Xi Jinping, seeking support from the BRICS bloc to counter US pressure. China is fast becoming Brazil's anchor in this economic storm. Mexico, too, is deepening its trade with Beijing. Its trade with China has surged to record highs. Exports reached around $5 billion in just 6 months. And Trump's response to all this? Dismissive. He said Latin America can do whatever they want, boasting that the US economy is blowing everyone away, including China.
Brazil, Mexico, and Latin America are getting closer to China, and they say it's partly because of the tariffs you're imposing those countries. Are you concerned them getting closer to China?
No, not at all. I'm not concerned at all. They can do what they want. None of them are doing very well, and what we're doing in terms of economics, we're blowing everyone away, including China. We're doing better than any other country in the world right now. Brazil has been a horrible trading partner in terms of tariffs.
But the reality is more complicated. As Trump leans on tariffs and backs Bolsonaro, Latin America leans harder on China. What began as a courtroom drama in Brazil is quickly turning into a geopolitical tug of war, and the stakes for trade, for power, and for influence are only getting bigger.
China, first row. China.
The nuclear clock is ticking once again, and this time the spotlight is not only on Iran's nuclear ambitions, but on Europe's threat to bring back sanctions that were lifted a decade ago. In response, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi made it clear that Tehran is not standing alone. He said Iran is working closely with China and Russia to block the so-called snapback mechanism under which the UK, France, and Germany are threatening to restore sanctions. Now, if this plan goes ahead, the Iranian leader warned Tehran has the tools to respond, though he stopped short of spelling out exactly what those might be.
We will try to prevent it. We are working with China and Russia to stop it. If this does not work and they apply it, we have tools to respond. We will discuss them in due course.
Now, China on Friday backed Iran and said that it opposes invoking fresh sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program. The country's foreign ministry spokesman said China believes that sanctions do not help parties build trust and bridge differences. This sudden escalation began after the European nations wrote to the United Nations, making it clear that if Iran does not return to diplomacy by the end of August or accept an extension, they will formally trigger the snapback provisions under the 2015 deal. That would mean reimposing the global arms embargo, banking restrictions, and bans on nuclear equipment.
We are equally ready and have unambiguous legal grounds to notify the significant non-performance of JCPOA commitments by Iran, thereby triggering the snapback mechanism should no satisfactory solution be reached by the end of August 2025.
Now, this all began with the 2015 deal known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was designed to restrict Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. But its framework collapsed when the United States withdrew from the deal in 2018. Since that time, Iran began enriching uranium well beyond civilian needs. And Western powers have long raised concerns about the lack of access given to inspectors from the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency to Iran's facilities. The confrontation has now only deepened after Israel launched a 12-day war on Iran. And the United States joined in with massive airstrikes even as it was conducting direct nuclear talks with Tehran. Since then, nuclear negotiations have completely broken down, with Tehran halting all cooperation. Still, a faint glimmer of diplomacy remains as the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog is expected in Tehran soon to discuss a possible new cooperation deal. But whether that visit can salvage any trust is uncertain, especially with the Europeans already warning that they have legal grounds to restore sanctions if Iran does not change course. Iran, for its part, however, says that the return of sanctions would be negative, but the predicted economic effects have been exaggerated. Last month, Araghchi sent a letter to the United Nations saying the European countries do not have the legal right to restore sanctions. In response, leaders from these European countries called the claims unfounded. And the deadline for the snapback provision is now set, and the deal is on its last breath. And unless there is a breakthrough, the world will witness the final collapse of the nuclear accord, and with it, the start of a new era of confrontation. And finally today, it's the travel nightmare no Canadian vacationer saw coming. Air Canada is about to clip its own wings, with a strike by 10,000 flight attendants set to take place this weekend. The country's largest airline is grounding hundreds of flights, leaving more than 100,000 passengers stranded during the summer travel season. And if you thought rebooking would be a breeze, well, think again. Our final report has more.
We want a contract. We don't want to go on strike. We don't want our passengers to be suffering. This is not something that we want. We love our passengers. It's our livelihood. We don't want to be out of a paycheck. We want to get back to the table and discuss.
Air Canada is preparing to ground most of its operations this weekend, with a strike by 10,000 unionized flight attendants set to begin on Saturday. The walkout, driven by stalled contract talks over wages and unpaid work, threatens to disrupt travel for around 100,000 passengers a day. At the peak of Canada's summer tourism season, on Thursday, the country's largest airline began winding down operations, canceling dozens of flights and warning that about 500 more will be scrapped by Friday. A total shutdown will begin on Saturday, though Air Canada Express flights, which carry 20% of daily passengers, will remain unaffected. Officials say restarting normal service could take up to a week. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, representing the striking flight attendants, issued a 72-hour strike notice on Wednesday. The union has accused Air Canada of walking away from negotiations and ignoring proposals to fairly compensate attendants for all hours worked, not just the time the plane is in motion. The union says attendants currently perform about 35 hours of unpaid duties monthly, including boarding passengers and waiting between flights. Air Canada says it has offered to pay for some of those hours, though only at half the hourly rate, alongside a proposed 38% increase in total compensation over 4 years, including a 25% raise in the first year. The union has not publicly disclosed its wage demands. The dispute spilled into public view when union members, carrying signs like "Unpaid work won't fly," disrupted an Air Canada press conference in Toronto. Air Canada officials called the strike avoidable, while one said the complexity of Air Canada's global network requires a gradual wind down rather than a sudden halt. It has over 250 aircraft flying to more than 65 countries.
Abrupt work stoppages at airlines create chaos for travelers. We have all seen pictures of people sleeping at airports, stranded far from home, and uncertain of their travel. This will also impact our cargo operations and have consequences on the supply chain.
Air Canada and its low-cost affiliate, Air Canada Rouge, typically carry 130,000 passengers daily. The airline also serves as the top foreign carrier for its U.S. codeshare partner, United Airlines. Passengers whose flights have been canceled will receive refunds, or will be given the option to fly with other carriers, though rebooking could take time. In the meantime, Air Canada is urging travelers without confirmed flights to avoid heading to the airport. If no breakthrough comes before Saturday, the strike could become one of the most disruptive labor disputes in Canadian aviation in years. It will test not just the patience of travelers, but the ability of Ottawa to intervene in a dispute that could ground a major piece of the country's transportation network.
That's all we have time for today. From all of us here at First Post America, we thank you so much for tuning in, not just today, but every day. Be sure to tell others about us and make sure you click the like on our YouTube page. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We'll see you back here next week.